tell us the difference between open carry and concealed carry?
Well, I'll keep it very simple. Open carry means you can carry it open. It can be seen. And we have had occasions where we have seen citizens carrying in an open way at a restaurant or at one of the retail stores, and they feel that it's okay to do that. And I think through the interpretation at one time by the state attorney general, that was going to be allowed and that was going to be okay. And concealed means it must be concealed. Now, when we talk in the context of this new law, when we are having these discussions about, well, are they supposed to keep it 100% concealed while they're on campus or in the classrooms and things of this nature? The answer is yes. But how about where they reach for something and someone can slightly see that weapon and say, well, it wasn't totally concealed because I could see it. And the question became, well, is that a violation of law? And the answer is no. The answer is no. So even if I'm a student on campus and I'm carrying and my jacket flies open because of the wind and then it closes back up, the person reporting it to us will probably say this person has a gun and it wasn't concealed. But when we arrive and we say what happened, he says, yeah, the wind blew, my jacket flew open. That would not be a violation of the law.
So is open carry legal? That's what I'm trying to understand. Can people brandish their guns in an open way?
Not on campus, but there are, I think, within the city, that yes, open carry is legal. I mean, does anyone have a
I think
my understanding?
your explanation of it currently rests on an ambiguous, or I should say an arguable interpretation of the existing law by Attorney General Leslie Rutledge. I believe that was from 2015. She said that she interpreted the law to mean that open carry is legal. To my knowledge, there's no actual law about open
That's
carry.
correct. We passed a law during the 2013 session that was supposed to be just a technical cleanup. The sponsor presented that way. Nobody raised the issue that this was going to somehow legalize open carry, but once the bill passed, some people began to make that case. The former Attorney General, Dustin McDaniel, issued an opinion saying, no, this particular law does not legalize open carry, but when Attorney General Rutledge took office, she issued an opinion going the other way. But it is ambiguous.
So people can have AR-15 in public parks where children are and can carry them around on their shoulders.
In the state of Arkansas, in Fayetteville.
Say it probably depends on local law enforcement and how aggressive they want to be in policing it, but I believe some people would, yes, make that case.
I believe that the Attorney General's opinion said that you could openly carry as long as you were not being a threat. There's probably a lot of...
Is it true that there is a law prohibiting using federal funds to be used for gun violence research?
It was the Dickey Amendment passed in the late 90s, right, by our own Congressman, the late Congressman Jay Dickey, who's from the 4th District in Arkansas. He actually, in his defense later on in life, came to regret that and went on a public campaign trying to convince Congress to restore funding for gun violence research to allow the CDC to research this issue. But it's my understanding that as of today, there is still a prohibition on that.
Anybody else want to comment on that? How can we go? How can we get military-grade armaments off the streets? I'm sorry, I can't read this. Well, I guess we'll start there. Get them off the streets versus, I mean, are they really needed for hunting, personal safety, or rural agricultural issues?
Are we speaking about military equipment and not necessarily for law enforcement? You're talking about the
Just in general, like for the population.
All your legislators.
We just have to make it towards not cool or socially acceptable to go walking around the Walmart with your AR-15, right? Like, I grew up around a ton of guns. My dad hunted, my uncles hunt. I've got no problem with people owning guns for the purposes of hunting or even recreation, shooting skeet, trap, just target practice. I don't know why anybody would need a weapon capable of firing 9 rounds a second like the weapon that the shooter in Las Vegas had. If you were really good with a Revolutionary War era musket, you could fire 9 rounds in about 2 minutes and 40 seconds. He was firing 9 rounds every second. I don't know why you need that kind of weaponry. But again, yeah, unless laws are passed to ban that kind of weaponry, we just have to make, we have to change the culture to where it's just not socially acceptable to carry those kinds of things in public.
Do you think there's a possibility that non-lethal law enforcement weapons such as, tasers and that sort of thing could ever replace deadly guns?
As far as the citizens?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm not really sure, but I know citizens can buy tasers and things of that nature, and that might be a personal choice, that they would want to carry a taser instead of actually carrying a firearm, and certainly they would be allowed to do that as long as they're using it in their defense and not using it in an offensive type of fashion. So if they want to use a chemical spray or something like a taser, that would be a choice, and of course, like with those items, you still would need the training, or like with a firearm, you would still need the training, I would think, because we also train with those type of devices as law enforcement officers. We have to go through what we call our OC training every year, and there's certain ways that we deploy it, and so I imagine that's just a personal choice.
Some said, I recognize that there are issues of improper safety, but it seems like lack of ability to deal appropriately with anger is also a problem. There are several other about mental health or mental illness issues. Can you all discuss that? Or how do we address that?
I can discuss it from the perspective of how high those facts make the stakes for this particular argument. So when you talk about mental health, often when you say, one of the reasons, so I teach on the university campus, and I was very against this bill, not so much for my personal safety, but because I am so deeply invested in the lives and well-being of my students. And I know the challenges that face that age group and the life changes and the physical brain changes that they're going through and the mental health issues. And that's where my real worry was. And people will say to you, well, look, even if they don't have easy access to a gun, they'll just find another way if they really want to harm themselves. The problem with that argument is that if you use a gun, you're over 90% likely to succeed, versus other methods that I think average out to something like 10%, maybe. My numbers might be wrong with the latter. But moreover, a huge percentage of folks who attempt suicide once don't attempt it ever again. And so if they're not successful in their first attempt, it really makes a difference in saving lives. So how to address it, I don't know, but it is an important component of this conversation. So thank you for bringing it up.
And I would like to comment, I try to, from a layman's point of view, I try to look at statistics of, like, if you look at the University of Arkansas, when we look at the numbers, are more students, faculty, staff going in for services, psychological services? Are the numbers increasing? Are we needing an increased staff to kind of accept people that are having coping skills and things of this nature? So when you have more guns, I sometimes refer to this ex-rapper, some of y'all may have heard of him, Biggie Smalls. He said, more money, more problems. And of course I hold a position, more guns, more problems. And so you get a situation where someone is having some coping problems. That's just an easy way, if it's there, to grab it and use it as the source to end that problem. And I think it's going to only become more and more serious because, as I understand it, more individuals are probably in need of psychological services or support or assistance in dealing with whatever they're facing today.
I think mental health is obviously a component of this, but I think it's also really unfair to people who live with mental health issues that every time we have one of these shootings, we just say it's a mental health problem, as though anybody with a mental health issue could be attacked. But in that regard, there is more we can do for mental health in this state and in this country. And it's particularly discouraging when you hear certain lawmakers say, well, mental health is the problem, and yet they're constantly attacking, healthcare funding or rolling back regulations that would prohibit people with mental health issues from doing it. So just like with any other issue, contact your lawmakers, know that. How many people in this room know who your state lawmaker is? I'm guessing a good chance it's me. Okay. Now everybody's raising their hands. You need to go home, look that up, know who your state representative, your state senator are, as well as everybody on city council who represents you in quorum court. Know how to contact them and contact them frequently and regularly. Even if you don't necessarily have an issue, just make sure they know who you are, because when you do need them, if you've established that relationship, they're going to be more likely to take that call, respond to that email, and talk with you. Don't wait until we get into legislative session or whenever. Develop those relationships now.
Guide to elected officials. Everybody can get a copy of this. This is where you'll find the guide to elected officials by the League of Women Voters. You'll get all that information there.
And they're in the back too. There's tons of information back there, so I hope y'all sign up and pick up things on the way out. Following up on that, so what do you think the most effective way to get the attention of your elected official is in general?
Really establishing that relationship. Every legislator, at least in my experience down at the Capitol, has a preferred method of being contacted. Some don't want to be contacted at all and actually get kind of aggravated when constituents talk to them. Some prefer phone, some prefer email. Email, as Patsy can attest, is not that good for me. The flood of email volume, it's a little too high sometimes for me to respond quickly. So I prefer a phone call or text, just if for no other reason to let you know that you have sent me an email. I also try to encourage people to be brief, polite, and on point, especially in that first contact. Especially if it's during legislative session, we're incredibly busy, and I open up an email that's 14 pages long, I'm probably not going to get to it immediately. So get the legislators' attention and establish that connection, and if they respond, then you can build on the conversation. But you've got to kind of know what the lawmaker prefer, how they prefer to be contacted. There's really nothing more powerful, though, than a face-to-face meeting, whether it's in their district or if you've got the time to go down to the Capitol and meet with them personally.
This is probably another legislative, it's about lobbying. Some have suggested you need to lobby at the level of the NRA. Why not create an alternative lobby? Mike Bloomberg has already donated, maybe Alice Walton or others could get on board.
Yeah, I don't know why there necessarily isn't an equivalent to the NRA, but there is this upstart group that I believe you said the day after the shooting in Vegas, more than 80,000 people joined in a day? In one day. That's how many people joined the day after that shooting. So it is growing, it is becoming more powerful. They're adding chapters here in the state. I think it's great that there's one in Jonesboro. That's surprising. I'm sure a lot of you remember there was a school shooting there in 97, I believe. So throw your support behind an organization like that. I think it is clear to point out, or good to point out, that the NRA does not represent gun owners. They represent the gun manufacturing industry. All they care is about selling more guns. And right now, President Obama being out of office, gun sales have kind of fallen flat. So they need to keep people fired up and excited. I did note, though, this week that increasingly now, after mass shootings, normally, especially during the Obama years, there'd be a spike in the sale of firearms right after mass shootings because everybody was afraid that Congress would finally take action. If they weren't going to do anything after 25 kids were shot in Connecticut, they're never going to do anything. And I think people have finally accepted that. And so gun sales aren't spiking after mass shootings anymore, which I think is, I guess that's good. I don't know. But yeah, throw your support behind Moms Demand or other groups like that.
Thank you. Also, there's an app called Lobby Up that has all your state representatives and their contact information too. So we'll have information about that as well. The next couple questions are about the enhanced carry. If you don't have to renew an enhanced licensure permit, and those that have them, is there any review about ongoing eligibility, or for instance, if there is a criminal act or a mental health issue after you have that, how is that addressed?
My understanding, there is no requirement or renewal process for the enhanced permit. Now again, with the concealed carry license, you have to have that renewed every 5 years. I don't believe you have to take the full course though. I think you just have to do the proficiency training.
That's my understanding, yes.
Right, so that like an hour or two maybe. Every
Depending on
5
the instructor.
depending on the instructor, every 5 years. But as far as the enhanced portion goes, no.
Okay, so no
Once you've
no
done
ongoing background checks.
it,
and that
you're
sort of
trained
thing.
for life.
Do you think the state police will incorporate de-escalation training in its enhanced carry course?
Here's something interesting. I was contacted, and I was contacted by an instructor, and I thought that they were pretty much going to set the standards of what that training would look like. 2 hours of actually on a firing range and 6 hours of presentation. And I thought that they would incorporate some of that type of training and really cover the gamut of what needs to be covered. But this instructor, when he questioned me, I said, well, what have they told you so far? And as a recent matter of fact, I think I'm meeting with him tomorrow morning. He said nothing. We really are not getting any direct guidance on exactly what this curriculum is going to be and what's going to be in it. And so his purpose of calling me was wanting to meet with me so he can start to develop the curriculum, because he wasn't really getting any traction from the state as to what that really will look like. So I think this is still a question mark, exactly of what this training is going to look like, how many hours most instructors will instruct. Will it really be just 4 hours? Will they talk about de-escalation? Will they really cover the ground of, well, in a college setting, when officers arrive on scene, what are the options you should take when you see an officer get there? I'm not really sure what it's going to be, and now my concern is, and I'm going to try to follow this up, from one instructor to the next, is it going to be different? Or is it going to be standardized across the board? My fear now, and I hope I'm very much wrong, is that I'm thinking it's going to be up to individual instructors right now unless they get more guidance, and hopefully that guidance is coming pretty soon because we're reaching some deadlines.
As I understand, the Arkansas State Police have had an open public forum, and it will be ending tomorrow for feedback about those particular issues. So if you have a chance to get, I think it's asp.org, but anyway, if you Google Arkansas State Police feedback, I think there's one more day if you have some public opinion that you'd like to share. Thank you. So are the names of concealed carry permit holders still shielded from FOIA, or Freedom of Information Act?
Yes.
Yes.
They are. Okay. Should they be? Is that a legislative answer?
I don't. If you are so convinced that you've got to have a gun and it's this constitutional right, I don't know why you'd be so afraid to have other people know it. All I got.
So does the number of mass shootings that we talked about, the 308, include shootings by police officer? And I guess that would be, well, mass shootings would be technically over 4, but would it include police officer?
Police don't generally engage in mass shootings. In my experience with them. No, mass shootings are just defined as a single incident where a shooter kills or injures at least 4 people in this same incident. And commonly, you don't count the shooter. If the shooter kills himself, you don't count the shooter in that number. So that's just a convention for defining what a mass shooting is.
There are statistics for officer-involved shootings, whether they're the victim or that they shot a suspect, available at Gun Violence Archive. It's a completely nonpartisan. They don't have an agenda. They just collect gun violence statistics. So gunviolence.org, gunviolencearchive.org.
And what are the local legislators and police officers focusing how to ensure that police officers do have practiced sensible gun protocols?
I'm sorry.
So do police have a focus to ensure that the officers practice sensible gun protocols?
That the officers should
Yes.
practice sensible? Well, I think we do address that. I mean, many police agencies have policies where we address basically, number one, how they might handle the firearms that's issued to them, and some even go as to how responsible you should be with your personal weapons even, and of course the standards of that you must follow regarding, well, do you take action when you're off duty and all that sort of thing. So that's been pretty much very much a discussion amongst law enforcement officers, and I think law enforcement officers in general, and for the most part, they understand a lot about gun safety because that's a tool they use to go out and do their jobs. And so in that training, they are told about that quite often. But let's be realistic. In my career, I've been involved with a situation where even when the officer knows better and has been trained, where we would have an accidental shooting. In training, where they might say dry fire and they fire a round into a bulletin board, that has happened. And it's happened at the University of Arkansas. It happened at Oklahoma State University. So it does occur even though they've been instructed on how to safely unload, load, and handle their weapons.
Probably important to understand too that police are required to qualify with their weapons on a fairly regular basis. You've got to pass tests and show your proficiency with your weapons on some regular basis, right?
Yes.
And so that's something that concealed carriers are not required to do on a regular basis. And if you speak with military weapons trainers, they will tell you that handgun proficiency is one of the most perishable military skills that there is. If you don't practice all the time, you're not going to hit what you aim at with a handgun. And they mean practice all the time. If you stop, you've lost that skill.
Somebody has inquired about the gun laws in Australia. Does anybody know about that? And I think
They might be. I think there was a mass shooting a couple years ago, and the government passed a law where they went up and rounded up assault
That
weapons.
was in the 1990s. In the 1990s, there was a mass shooting in Australia. I think it's something on the order of 50 people or so might have been killed in that incident. And the nation, what's that?
23 people killed.
23 killed in that?
Well,
Okay.
a lot more wounded.
Yeah, okay. So, and as a consequence of that mass shooting in Australia, the nation of Australia banned assault weapons, and they gathered them all up. They literally gathered up all the assault weapons in the country and banned them, and they haven't had a mass shooting since. So that's the law in Australia.
And their suicide rate went down.
That's correct. That's also correct.
the comment from the audience was that their suicide rate went down.
And I would like to make a comment when we look at other countries and so forth. I came across an article written by someone that I think it was titled Jews for the Protection of Gun Rights. And then it made reference, they made mention that some people talk about suicide rates and things as far as guns in America and so forth. Look at Japan, they don't have much gun violence at all, but yet their suicide rates are high. They choose to jump in front of trains and things of this nature. But let's assume that they had pretty much open gun laws or gun laws similar to what the United States has. Do you think the suicide rate in Japan would be even higher than what it is?
Yes.
Absolutely, absolutely. So they have taken a position, I guess they have laws on the books that minimize individuals just being able to have guns and that sort of thing. And yet their suicide rate is high, but I would argue that if they had laws similar to the United States, the suicide rate would be much greater than even what it is today.
Thank you for that. Here's just a basic, but it's pretty profound. What do you think the root cause for gun violence is in America? And I think probably all of you could comment on that.
Part of it is access. When you look at other developed countries, we outpace them all by orders of magnitude because we have some of the loosest laws. I think part of it's culture. They are sometimes glamorized, but I also don't want to just fall back on the stereotype that just because you happen to watch action movies as a kid, you're going to grow up and think that guns are cool. But again, it does go back to there is some sort of cultural or social component to this, and we just have to make it to where these things aren't acceptable.
So, you will often hear from a lot of our opponents that guns don't kill people, people kill people, but people kill people with guns. And All you have to do to prove that to yourself is try to reimagine any incident of gun violence. I don't care which one. Choose a single murder, choose a mass murder, choose whatever you want to choose. Think of any single incident of gun violence and reimagine that incident without the gun. And what would the outcome have been? Probably not a murder. It's the guns.
And I do also want to add, when we talk about gun violence, it comes in many different forms. You do have gang violence, you have domestic violence. The gentleman in Southern Springs, Texas, it looks like he had some issues with his in-laws. So when you talk about gun violence, you have to also realize that there's all different forms. So I don't know that there really is just one motivating thing.
I don't know if I have much to add to that other than to second that the glorification of guns, I think, is something that is particularly American and makes this problem particularly hard to solve here. For instance, there would obviously be no rounding up all of the anythings like there was in Australia, right? We glorify gun culture. We see guns as extensions of ourselves in a way that I think needs real cultural change, as Greg was saying earlier.
And there's a school of thought out there that if let's just say that we were able to go out and solve gang violence, basically stop gang violence, that argument says then you would see a large drop in shootings and things of this nature. And I guess their position is because of gang violence is so prevalent in the United States, that accounts for a lot of the statistics. And if you can kind of do something about that, then of course the statistics will show a more favorable or better situation for all of us.
So other than advocating for sensible gun law reforms, do you have other thoughts or measures that may help reduce gun violence in Arkansas and the U.S.? I think, Nicole, you started on some of those kind of tangible takeaways.
Yeah, we have two tangible takeaways, the Be Smart program and these signs. I think one thing that I didn't explicitly mention that is such an important piece of this puzzle is showing up and talking about it just with each other, not with our legislators, and just having conversations with each other so that we can see